Sounds like dinner is ready. Darwinia is an indie game from 2005, developed by Introversion Software, same guys behind Uplink, Defcon, Prison Architect, before the study to Paradox, Scanner Sombre and the last Starship. So, Darwinia is a non-standard RTS that's quite unique and there is nothing quite like it out there. The story is weirdly grounded at times and then bonkers in others. It's a weird balance, sort of like the gameplay. Darwinia is a digital world that has been in development for decades. It was developed as some sort of virtual theme park, whatever that is. Maybe like a VR chat server? But most importantly, it is a world, a simulated world, with a simulated ecosystem, simulated resources and simulated inhabitants, the Darwinians. They're adorable, just look at them. Anyway, all living creatures in Darwinia have a sort of digital soul. Upon death, this soul physically ascends to the soul repository at the center of Darwinia and then comes back down to be reborn. This whole process allows the Darwinians to be digital evolving life forms, not that kind. And over thousands of generations they have developed their own beliefs, culture and society. However, Darwinia has currently been overtaken by a virus that has infected and overtaken the vital infrastructure that keeps the cycle of death and rebirth going, ensuring that the current population of Darwinians is effectively the last. And that's where we come in. We're just a random nosy hacker that has gotten access to Darwinia at just the right time to save it. Graphically, Darwinia is unique. The world itself is a good representation of this. I love this sort of digital worlds, I can't get enough of them. It has a retro art style, kind of Hackerman-ish. The most similar thing I've seen are the cyberspace section of the original System Shock, though Darwinia pulls it off much better. It kinda looks like those fake games you'd see people playing in TV shows. Units and enemies are a blend of pixelated 3D models and flat sprites that are easily identifiable. This is exactly why art style is so important. Darwinia is unique and nothing looks quite like it. At a glance you can easily tell it's Darwinia. You could say it came out last year and I would believe you, though I have some minor nitpicks. Darwinia sometimes can be hard to see due to being flat, and some enemies are very samey looking though it's only two. Anyhow, how's the gameplay? Right out of the gate, the game sorts of plays like an RTS, though Age of Empires it is not, nor is it trying to be. It's real-time strategy, but it's not very demanding nor micromanagement heavy. It's not a very hard game, and if things go wrong the most of what you'll lose is time, since you can reset the levels at any point. Let's start with what isn't here. There is no minimap, no base building, no resources, and there is no drag to select, so you can control only one unit at a time. Also, unit build times are non-existent, you spawn it and it's ready to use. The trade-off is that you can only have 5 units at a time, and that's after upgrades. But don't worry, we still get armies. The most unique thing about Darwinia is that your units can only move in a straight line. And they can't move around obstacles very well, so you'll have to take your time to make them move through the levels. Anyway, there aren't many units, so I'll go over them all. The squad is your workhorse. It's, in theory, your main offensive unit. They won't move unless ordered to, and will shoot at nearby enemies. Actually, they are quite good at keeping themselves alive, which is a theme with all units in Darwinia. Except maybe for one, but we'll get to that. By selecting them, you can directly control the aim of the squad. Doing this gives them a buff to their fire rate, on top of letting you prioritize the targets. Though doing this is never absolutely necessary except for key targets. 2 squads can handle basically anything that doesn't require explosives to be killed. And once you start upgrading them, they get more units for each group, which means more fire rate, even more if you take control. The most important thing about controlling them is the alternate fire modes, which is how you'll handle anything that's immune to lasers. The first you'll unlock is grenades, followed by the airstrike and finally rockets. When it comes to spawning, you can only spawn them around a certain range of control towers. Your second unit is the engineer. You can spawn them around squads or control towers. They have no weapons, so they are totally defenseless. Their creator describes them as just dumb debugging tools, and he's absolutely right. Remember when I said that units in Darwinia are surprisingly competent? Yeah, none of that is true for the engineer. They're absolute dumbasses that you'll have to babysit constantly. and unlike the squad, you can never get rid of them. So, what do? They're the ones that capture control towers for you. So you'll need them to move through the map, progress through the game, and spawn the best unit in the entire game, the Darwinians. Remember the souls I mentioned? Engineers can pick up the souls of fallen enemies or Darwinians and take them to an active incubator to have them reprogrammed and spawn new Darwinians for you. Unlike the squad, engineers can move out of their own will and will move out of their own will. This is the problem. See, their priorities are dogshit. Let's say you want to capture some souls before they ascend and you lose them. If there is a control tower or files nearby, the engineer will completely ignore the souls and go straight for the file or tower. You have no control over their priorities and it gets worse. They have a limit over how many souls they can carry. This can be upgraded, but the problem is that once they hit this limit, they will go straight for an active incubator, and I do mean straight. Straight through enemies or straight through impassable terrain that will kill them instantly and make recovering those souls extremely difficult. And it still gets worse. If you're trying to hoard souls so you can spawn Darwinians in a specific location once you unlock that incubator, the engineers will constantly enter return mode and try to go to an active incubator to deliver those souls. Constantly. Once they go ill, they will try to go to an active incubator. So you have to maintain them in position constantly. Ugh. I swear these guys are working with the virus. So, then there's the Darwinians. They're not really one of your units since you can't directly control them nor spawn them at will, but they're still the best unit in the game and one of your best weapons. One would think that for a game that revolves around saving the Darwinians, you will have to babysit and protect them constantly, but there is only 2 missions that require you to score Darwinians and one is optional. Their upgrades are all about giving them weapons to fight back, and honestly, Darwinians with lasers are busted. Only reason why Darwinians can't solo the game is because only 2 enemies are vulnerable to lasers, and even then there's still a workaround for that. Darwinians are super competent. They want to stay alive and will run away from danger but won't stop shooting. Only downside really is that you can't directly control Darwinians and you require officers to move them around. They are so reliable that eventually they'll become your main offensive unit. Their last upgrade is grenades, which is a bit of a nerf because since they actively want to stay alive, they will run away from the blast, but unlike when running away from enemies, they will stop shooting because they'll panic, which is a negative amount of daga, which is a nerf in my book. Besides, while 2, technically 3 enemies are only vulnerable to explosives, one requires timing so specific to be killed that Darwinians are not really the best choice to deal with them, and the other, they don't register as an enemy so won't attack it, and the third will take many losses before going down. And while this is a viable strategy for the late game, this is only because in the last 2 levels you have an unlimited supply of Darwinians, making War of Attrition your main strategy by that point. Officers are your method to control Darwinians. They can issue commands that the Darwinians follow. Their upgrades are all about giving them new orders. They come with a point order that lets them guide the Darwinians lemming style, and eventually unlock a follow me order, which is pretty much the best order they have. They can be spawned anywhere, but they're a promotion for Darwinians, so you require Darwinians to spawn them. Their third upgrade gives them a shield. I honestly didn't find it so useful. The armor is the last unit you'll get, and the only one you'll ever need. See, it's an APC. It can move Darwinians around while being near, but it also is studied in Cybertron and can transform into a cannon to fuck shit up. Yeah, nothing can stand against the cannons. They need flat terrain and Darwinians to operate, but they absolutely mow down anything in range. So their upgrades are all about giving them more range and carry capacity. The fact that they are also an APC means that you can move them around and place them beforehand to help you out. You can only spawn them around trunk ports because technically they are being fabricated and not spawned, but they can move through any terrain. And I do mean any. And water. So, I mentioned control towers and upgrades a lot, and I did say that I was gonna get back to that, so... Control towers are basically the command post of structures in Darwinia. The virus has put most of them offline, but the engineers can bring them back online. Take one control tower and you'll have the structure it commanded on your side, which can be relay stations to move through the level, trunk ports to spawn armor or unlock new levels, or incubators which will spawn Darwinians when souls are brought to them by engineers. But something the game never really explains to you is that they also unlock research. Basically, all your tools can be upgraded. Most give you a clear description on what they do. Squads get more units, Darwinians gain weapons, officers new orders, armor more range. Even your basic laser can be upgraded, and the alternate fire modes. Research is what fills the bar that marks each upgrade. Every time you capture one, it will make whatever research you have currently selected progress a bit for some time. Which is why I've seen people, including me, mistakenly believe that research only takes time. I know I did spend more than needed on levels thinking I was getting research early on. Speaking of things that the game doesn't explain to you, the tutorial sucks. And that's because it's actually not the tutorial. You see, the tutorial is hidden all the way in the menu as the prologue, which is a weird thing to call something that's basically an epilogue. However, it's still not very good. Like, the only thing I didn't know that I found out from it was that you could press C to zoom. I guess it's useful to aim relay dishes, but I played the game several times throughout the years and I never felt like I needed it. I have another thing to say that the game doesn't mention, but I'll hold it off for now. The task manager determines how many programs you can run at the same time. It's pretty straightforward for the most part, but armors and officers do have special mechanics. Officers don't take spies after spawning, meaning you only need the slot before spawning it, but not to keep them around. An armor only takes the space on APC mode. Once deployed, it stops counting. Later levels do get bigger, so it's good to upgrade it to run more programs at the same time. However, controlling units can be a bit clunky at times, down to the UI. So, the task manager determines how many units you can have at a time. Units will stay on the task manager in the order they were spawned in. You can reselect them from there, but it won't take you to the units. Instead, it will show an icon showing you where they are. There is also no control groups, however, clicking the numbers on your keyboard will select the units in the task manager in the order they were spawned. Nowhere in game is this ever mentioned, I only found this out while checking if the game had control groups. You know, it would have been more useful to know this than pressing C for zoom, and while it does help, you can't rearrange the units on the task manager to better suit yourself. You could spawn them on an orderly manner, but eventually when the fighting starts, they'll start to die and be replaced on the fly, so you'll lose that order anyway. Also, since there is no control groups, how do you reselect units that don't stay on the task manager, like officers and cannons? That's right, you don't. You can only reselect them by clicking on them on the world. Look, I can't stress enough that Darwinia is not a demanding game. Remember that these sort of things are a problem because I played a lot of RTS games over the years and been returning to Darwinia a number of times. In fact, since the game is quite short, you'll likely adapt to its weirdness quickly. I suspect that a lot of this clunkiness is in fact intentional. Sure, it has an in-game explanation, but I can't help but feel like it was done because the developers knew that the game wasn't too demanding, and thus if we had more quality of life, we will breeze through the already short game. Speaking of trying to control your units, you better remember to press space. Like I mentioned already, the AI of your units is quite decent and you can reasonably rely on them. But the problem is that squads only have a will of their own to shoot while you're not controlling them. That means that you could make an entire plan, move your squads strategically to take out enemies and then lose them because you forgot to press space so they couldn't defend themselves, which caused both to get overwhelmed. This is not that costly, but it is annoying, and in some maps the walk back can get long, something not helped by the fact that this is part of the game's biggest issue: unit movement. Units only being able to move on straight lines is easy enough to get used to. What isn't is that all units use different methods to move through the terrain and all seem to have a logic of terrain that only they use. Let me explain. Squads only move on a straight line and can't cross water, not too steep terrain. Terrain evasion is something I'll get back to, but for now the main issue is that it's not clear what counts as too steep for the squad. Something made worse by the fact that the squad's problems with steep terrain ranges from moving slowly to getting stuck and unable to move anymore. So while you don't have to babysit squads for combat, you do have to babysit them to make sure they get where they're going to. Engineers levitate and can cross all terrain including water without issues. Biggest issue is having to wrestle the priorities all the time. Darwinians can't move through water but can cross all terrain. They somewhat slow down on steep terrain, but I've never seen them get forever stuck like the squad. Sometimes they get lost though. Also, while they can only move on a straight line, they can wiggle around a bit to try to find their way if they hit an obstacle to a greater degree than the squad. Officers are basically a Darwinian under your direct control, but for some godforsaken reason they don't use the same movement logic than the Darwinians. On flat terrain, they move faster than Darwinians, which is good when you're sending them somewhere, but also a curse because they'll go straight into enemies without backup all the time. But the actual problem here is that they share traits with the squad when it comes to steep terrain. Like Darwinians, they can cross any terrain and don't get stuck, but for some damn reason, they slow down more than Darwinians on steep terrain, slowing down entire operations. And finally, armor. Armor is beautiful, it can go through water, steep terrain, anything, and it doesn't need to only move on a straight line. It's pretty awesome to see them jump off mountains. They don't face many problems with the terrain except when you want to deploy the cannon, in which case it's not clear what's too steep or flat enough. And since we're speaking of the terrain now, it can get quite steep and it makes aiming hard at times. Enemies can hide pretty well and throwing grenades can bite you in the ass thanks to hitting the terrain. It's entirely possible to set up a cannon in a position where it can shoot at anything due to the elevation, and not realize it. But to be fair, sometimes you can be shooting at things with the cannon without any cover and still don't hit, so there is something weird going on with the cannons anyway. But with that out of the way, why don't we talk about the enemies? They're not super complex and there aren't many, so I can go over them quick. Beery are your basic enemy. It's the first enemy you'll face. They're pretty unique looking, though at times the light over the terrain can make them hard to spot. Their whole deal is numbers, otherwise they're not dangerous. The Centipede is like an upgraded Beery. It's faster and a bit more powerful, but the important thing about them is that you can only kill them by destroying all the segments. If you happen to destroy a middle segment, it will split into two. If left alone, they will consume the souls of the fallen and regrow to full size, which means you can multiply them on accident. Spore generators are weird jellyfish looking things. They don't attack at all, but they do lay eggs that hatch into more Beery, so not dealing with them fast enough can cause the hordes to really grow in size. To top it off, they're immune to lasers and can only be damaged by explosions, but only when they reach the ground to lay an egg. It's worth noting that the terrain elevation can make them hard to deal with. It's not always immediately clear when they're close enough to take damage, and in my first playthrough I did think they were the first times I faced them, but it was just a string of bad luck. So then we get the spiders, aka the main reason why Darwinians can't solo the game. They're only vulnerable to explosions and their whole deal is that they lunge forward to attack, mostly in the same amount of time it takes for the damn grenades to go off. They can also lay eggs that hatch into Beery, but to be honest I've only noticed them doing this in one level. They also have a bit of a tendency to hide in weird corners of map geometry to jumpscare you. They can take a lot of Darwinians before going down. The Triffids are not mobile, but they shoot a special kind of egg. After a certain amount of time, these eggs can hatch into a variety of things, though it's always the same in each level, and they don't seem to be able to change it. It can be Beery, it can be 3 eggs that hatch into Beery, it can be centipedes or spiders. Just like the generators and spiders, they're immune to lasers, and weirdly enough, Darwinians don't react to them at all, so even after the grenade upgrade, only you can deal with them. They're usually on hard to reach places with squads and point straight to where they're the most annoying. Ants are fast and come in hordes too big for anything to deal with. Also, any soul or Darwinian in their range will be taken back to their anthills to make more ants. Only way of dealing with them are the cannons. You'll only see them like 2 times and won't even show up to the last stretch of the game. Red Darwinians, evil Darwinians, I call them Darkwinians. They're Darwinians infected by the same virus that has invaded their world. While they're not immune to lasers nor explosions, they're a dangerous foe due to the same reasons the Darwinians were so competent. Once again, cannons are the best way of dealing with them, but just like Darwinians, they can take control of cannons and you don't want that to happen. Remember when I said that 2 enemies kinda blurred together? The Soul Destroyer, despite their quite dramatic name, is presented as not much more than an overgrown centipede. In fact, I completely forgot that it existed and thought it was a large centipede. Unlike any other enemy in the game, those who fall to the Soul Destroyer won't leave a soul behind, facing what's closest to true death in Darwinia. Except since they fly, the only way of dealing with them is cannons. Yeah, I didn't even notice the fact that they destroy souls until I read the manual. But with all of that out of the way, how's the story? Darwinia is in this weird spot where the story is surprisingly grounded, with some touch of fantasy, but when you go looking for more, it goes bonkers. Though overall it's a fun thing with good ideas. But let's move on. The start of Darwinia doesn't really explain much at all, just the basics to give you a bit of context and release you. So let's consult the sacred text, the manual. Yeah, Darwinia was physically available at stores at some point. I've only seen people talking about owning it online. I haven't found a photo of it myself, though it's not like I look too deep. Anyway, back on topic. Back in the 80s, a guy going by Dr. Sepulveda, or Sepulveder as he liked to be called, at the helm of a company named Protologic, released a machine called the Protologic 68000. It was revolutionary, or it would have been, except that not a single unit was sold. So, Sepulveder was left with no company and warehouses worth of stock of the machines. Fast forward to now, and Dr. Sepulveda has resurfaced with a virtual theme park and talking about incredible AI. So, how did this happen? Apparently, since he didn't have anything better to do other than experiment with the machines, he figured out that Protologic 68000s, when working on tandem, resonated at a quantum level and shared data through quantum interference. He called this phenomenon hyperprocessing, and it was exponential. So, he hooked up all of them to make a quantum computer and created a virtual world. Yeah, I kinda feel like Miguel TV on Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. You know, when Miguel is freaking out because Wonka built a teleporter but all of Wonka can think of is candy? My boy Sepulveder made a damn quantum computer, and all he thought of doing was a damn virtual theme park? What even is a virtual theme park? In any case, Darwinia is taken over by a virus that disrupts the vital infrastructure of the world, and the virus advances too quickly for Dr. Sepulveda to do anything, and eventually all of Darwinia is invaded. So, in a last-ditch attempt to fix the situation, he shut down the trunk ports connecting the world, forcing the virus into a stalemate that he will lose when the current generation of Darwinians dies of old age. And then the player arrives, serving as the tiebreaker. Thanks to our presence, Sepulveda can focus on research while you take command of the whole operation. And you'll do this by capturing the control towers present on all the levels and exterminating all the monsters created by the virus. When I said that Darwinia was surprisingly grounded, this is what I meant. Instead of going on an all-out war, first you have to take back Darwinia's infrastructure to gain back the industrial power needed to make the weapons to win the conflict, and then regain control over the infrastructure that has allowed the virus to become so powerful. All of the levels are named after the function they served before the virus came, which gives us small glimpses of the world of Darwinia. We see the industry of Darwinia, how the cycle of death and rebirth operates, and a little bit of the culture. Speaking of Darwinians, they celebrate once all objectives are completed, and we light up lanterns to honor the fallen. Garden is where we first arrive. Sepulveda asks us who we are, but then figures that if we're not leaving, then we might as well help. So he gives us access to the task managers and the first units. Containment is where Sepulveda did his last stand before being pushed into the stalemate. We can see the double shield wall that he deployed trying to slow down the virus. It's also where your engineers can head slam straight to death. I swear these were yellow every time I played. Since when are they blue? So, right after the containment, Dr. Sepulveda asked us to take back Darwinia's industrial sector to make a weapons platform he designed. Of course, this being a simulated world, that means it can't be made out of thin air. It needs resources, energy, and a factory to be made, which takes us to Mine, Generator, and Yard. Mine is the place where the polygons that are turned into waste materials are gathered. Once Darwinians start taking back the buildings on Mine, the minecarts will start to move and resources will be harvested, so we need to take back the energy needed to power the factory over on Yard. So we go to Generator. Darwinia runs on solar power. The panels are operated by Darwinians, it's pretty straightforward. But with these two runnings, we can head over to Yard and put the factory back online. Yeah, Yard is pretty much the biggest fight you'll have at that point. You have to open the trunk ports to mine and generators so that the energy and resources can come in, and also send Darwinians to operate the factory. With that, the factory starts to run and pump out the weapons platform. Dr. Sepulveda's trump card turns out to be the armor. From here, you have what you need to finish the fight. The virus took over Darwini's cycle of death and rebirth. The receiver is where the souls that come back down from the soul repository are sent to be reborn. Of course, currently no Darwinian is operating the machines because they're a bit busy being dead. By this point the formula is clear: move in, farm some Darwinians, move them to operate the machines, and with that out of the way we move to Pattern Buffer. Pattern Buffer looks awesome. Honestly, I didn't completely understand the technobubble, but I think here is where souls will come and get reprogrammed into Darwinians back when the cycle wasn't overtaken by the virus. Those beams and images change dynamically as you start to take control of the machinery, and it's here that we see Darwinians for the first time. This is just my headcanon, but since we brought the soul repository back online, the cycle of death and rebirth of Darwinia is working again, which means that the biosphere, which is the main spawning ground of the Darwinians, is now pumping out Darwinians. With the virus cleansed from the pattern buffer, it's time to take back the spawning ground over at the biosphere. And this will be the bloodiest battle in Darwinian history. In lore, the battle for the biosphere changed the Darwinians forever. You may have been noticing it already, but the Ascending Souls will remain for a long while in the map, slowly rising to the sky and serving as a reminder of every battle. From here, they will get huge. The first thing you'll likely notice about Biosphere are the Moai-like statues spread around the map. This is the first thing we see about the Darwinian culture, and actually the only one aside from the lanterns. Second thing you'll see is the network connecting several buildings resembling the incubators. These are spawners. They need to be operated, and once crewed, they'll spawn a set amount of whoever is crewing them, Dark or Darwinians. So you have an unlimited supply of Darwinians at this point and don't have to bother collecting souls anymore. With the Biosphere recapture, we have basically taken Darwinia back. Only thing left is eliminating the source of the virus back at the ground zero. The game's last level, Temple. This level goes exactly like how Biosphere went. Though you'll notice the files spreading around the virus, this makes the squad relevant again since they won't be turned into monsters when getting close. Once we blow them all up, we found out how this all started. On accident, Dr. Sepulveda flashed his face across the skies of Darwinia, and the Darwinians thought he was God, which, I mean, he literally is. The Moai-like statues are actually the Darwinians trying to replicate Dr. Sepulveda's face, and in an attempt to communicate with him, they angled a trunk port to the soul repository and managed to download files from Dr. Sepulveda's computer. That's how his files ended up in Darwinia. But also his emails. Hidden in 3 spam mails came the virus. So yeah, Darwinia was almost destroyed by the Nigerian prince. In any case, we blow up the spam mails and have officially gotten rid of the virus. Mostly. Dr. Sepulveda reflects on how his life's work was saved by a random person when he was close to resetting everything, and as thanks, he gives us the All Access profile and the map editor. So, Darwin is a fun ride. It manages a weird balance that, while it is clunky, is not demanding too much out of you to the point of it being a problem, and I suspect a ton of that clunkiness is intentional. My main problem with the game comes from the fact that it had incredible ideas that it chose to do nothing with. So, let's look at the genres: strategy, real-time, and virtual life. I agree with the first two, but virtual life is absolutely unwarranted. You don't directly control the Darwinians, but all they ever do when not ordered around is wander mostly aimlessly around where they're standing. At least we could have been showed levels happening on Darwinian cities or villages overrun by the virus, but aside from the Moais or the lanterns, we see nothing of the Darwinian culture and beliefs Sepulveda is so proud of. As it stands, Darwinia is just a weird RTS. There could be so much more done with this concept, even without truly going insane with the AI. I know having the Darwinians be able to learn and start fighting the virus on their own would have been too much, but it would have been cool to see them build defenses on suitable terrain like Populous, or at least have them react a bit to the things happening around them. Wouldn't you say that squads and engineers would be the equivalent of angels for them? Why not have them worship them as they pass by? Something I want to praise the game for is the characterization of the virus, or lack thereof. The virus is never anything more than just dumb animals. If the Darwinians had weapons from the start, this whole deal would have never happened. It would have been easy to go full pretentious and develop the virus as some sort of evil swarm. But rather than going the pretentious route, they knew they were making something simple and stayed true to it. Don't get me wrong, I like Swarm Faction on RTS games. They're my main, but I respect the game sticking to being simple. Overall, I would like to see more out of Darwinia, but all we got was Multiwinia, which maybe I'll cover it on a short video. And with the last Starship on early access, I don't think Introversion is coming back to Darwinia anytime soon.